Every year, a number of new drugs, medical instruments, and other medical products appear on the market. How are they usually tested so that we can be sure that those products are safe and effective?
It's a very lengthy, complex process. In fact, it may take 15, 25 years from start to finish when it comes to pharmaceuticals and biopharmaceuticals. It starts from the stage of identifying a molecule, then testing that in the laboratory stage, then move it forward to the animal testing and further testing before decisions get made to start testing it in humans. So that process alone could be 5 to 10 years, sometimes 15 years, because it gets thoroughly tested in every possible way to identify ways to make sure that it would be efficacious, that it will work for the intended purpose. And then obviously most importantly is that it will be safe. After we get the assurance and reassurance that this will be efficacious and safe in the laboratory, in what we call in vitro, and then in vivo, which is in animals though, then we have to go through a lengthy regulatory process where a company will apply to the regulatory bodies, government agencies, to review the data, analyze the data, and give approval to start testing it in humans. When we start that phase, it's called phase 1, where it's studied usually in volunteers, healthy volunteers. But it depends. If it's an oncology or cancer drug, we don't obviously usually test them in volunteers because it would not make sense. So it depends on the type of medication it is. If it's for blood pressure, for heart disease, or some other areas, we usually do them in normal volunteers. But so that's phase 1. It could be 10 people, 20 people, where we do a few of those studies. And most of the time it's done in a hospital setting where they are in what we call a phase 1 unit. And we have to be 100% sure that it's safe. That's the first part, safety. We don't want to damage anybody's health or organs or in any way it would be disastrous, obviously. So that's done. And then once that's done, then we go to phase 2, which would be 20 to 50 to 100 patients or subjects. Depends on the type of medication it is. And we do few studies of that where we're now testing safety and efficacy. And every stage we have to go through regulatory discussions. We submit study reports, data, all kinds of extensive analysis to show that it's safe and efficacious for us to be able to go to the next study and the next phase. When we're assured of that, then we go to phase 3 where we do large studies. And that would depend on, again, on the type of medication it is. If it's for high blood pressure, we may be studying 10,000 people. For cardiovascular, sometimes it could be 100,000, diabetes and so on. For oncology, again, it will be smaller numbers, but it could be in the hundreds and the thousands. And if those studies go well, then again, we put a huge, what we call a dossier together. So it could be volumes and volumes of work, where we give it to the health authorities, and they take about anywhere from 6 months to a year to review, analyze, get experts in, and then make a decision whether this can be taken to the market or not. Many times after it goes to market, then we do phase 4, phase 5 studies. These are post-marketing studies to ensure that it's still safe. And when you start exposing tens of thousands of people, millions of people, we have to gather data to still prove the safety and not so much the efficacy anymore, but mostly the safety. So this whole process, as I said, could be 15, 20 years and very costly. the data was that if you start with 100 molecules, different molecules, maybe one of them will make it. So it's that definitive way of finding and getting to the market. So things are a little changing now because of technology. Because of AI, the earlier phases are getting a bit faster right now. The discovery phase, which is when we do the finding the molecule and testing it in vitro, that's called the discovery phase. That's getting faster, but we still are unsure. We'll see where it takes.
Do all drugs and pharmaceuticals that end up on the market undergo at least these 3 phases of trials?
If it's a new molecular entity, so if it's new and new indication, yes. But if it's what we call a generic pharmaceutical, for example, when aspirin was approved, let's say, it had to go through that process. But now there are many companies that produce aspirin in a generic format. Those, as long as they prove to the regulatory authorities that it's the same active ingredient and the other, what we call excipients, that would be, let's say, sugar in it and etc., are not harmful, it's proven not to be harmful, then they have to go through bioavailability and bioequivalence studies, which are similar to phase 1 studies, where they have to show in the bloodstream that it's the same level as the actual drug. Once that happens, then they can get approval. So it's much shorter, much cheaper to get over-the-counter medications and generics approved. But again, if it's anything new, it will go through that process.
What trials and studies does your company perform?
So I'm the CEO of the international business of ClinChoice. ClinChoice is a company that's called a CRO, Contract Research Organization. What we do is we do clinical studies. So we do the research around the clinical studies, the ones that I mentioned, phase 1, 2, 3, etc. And we do those as a service to the major pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies in the world. And we have, for example, 6 of the top 10 in the world as clients. So that's exactly what we do. We run these trials and we do all the ancillary service around those trials. When I say ancillary service, it's not just taking it and giving it to a patient and getting the bloodstream. No, you have to prepare a site, you have to prepare an investigator, you have to get audited by authorities to make sure that people know what to do, how to do it. Then it depends on the type of study we do. It could be a blinded study that we have to make sure, there would be a placebo, which means like a sugar pill, and the real medication. People don't know which one they are taking. Either sometimes the doctor who's giving it doesn't know which one they are giving it to which patient, because to get real data, that you have to make it a blinded study. Sometimes single-blinded, only the patient doesn't know. Sometimes double-blinded, doctor and patient don't know. You have to do that so there is no bias and prejudice when the data comes. And then from there, the regulators can determine between the active and the placebo if there is a variation and difference in efficacy and safety. And then we make determinations whether it's safe and efficacious to proceed further. So the ancillary services are also regulatory strategy, documents. We write all kinds of documents for the regulatory bodies and to the clients, to the hospitals, data analysis, database programming, and so on.
How much should the difference between the efficiency of the placebo and the active ingredients be, so that we can say that the ingredient that is being tested really works?
Yeah, that would vary on the type of medicine we're looking at. For example, if it's for a cancer study, oncology study, sometimes a weak difference in somebody's life is enough to say, okay, it's worth giving it. But let's say if you were giving it to for blood pressure. If you reduce it by 2 millimeters, maybe it's not enough. Maybe it has to be 5 millimeters to make a difference in their health. So everything is different. So there is no set margin. But definitely it has to show improvement over placebo. And again, it could be very different for the different disease area that we're looking at. As long as it improves the health, improves the lifestyle, the quality of life, extends life, and doesn't do harm, then it will probably get approved. When I say it doesn't do harm, I have to say there is harm in everything we take, okay? So there is no such thing as no harm. But you need to do what's called the benefit risk assessment. So if the harm is only this much, but the benefit is this much, it's worth taking that risk, right? But if they are even, then you say it's not worth it. So unfortunately, there is nothing that's harmless. Even, the most simple things, there is no such thing as harmless medication or treatment. We have to go for surgery as an example. There are risks. So if you need your gallbladder removed, it's 99% safe, but there is that 1% chance that something can go wrong. This is the same situation. We have to do the benefit and risk. And if, for the 99%, I'll have the surgery or I'll take the medication.
Do you work with any of the very large and well-known pharmaceutical companies?
Yes. I don't want to name them, but the answer is yes. If you look at the top 10 in the world, which are known by everyone, we work with 6 of those 10 on an ongoing basis for the past 20, 30 years, in fact. So we got a small project, and then we grew those projects as we went. Similarly with biotechnology companies, medical device companies, very well-known companies that we work with. And those services, many of those we bring here to Armenia. So we can say that Armenia supports those major, what we call multinational corporations, the largest in the world, and we support them.
Imagine there is a company that has created some drug and has already spent a lot of money on it. And then this drug comes to a clinical trial. How can people be sure that the trial will be really fair and honest? Those who do the trial understand that the company has spent a lot of money on that drug. And if they say the drug is not safe or effective, it will harm the company.
Excellent question. There are a few ways to answer that. As I said, we may start with hundreds molecules, but we will end up with only one. And some of them die early, so to speak. Some die later. We hope most of them die before we start testing them in humans. But quite a few actually are retired and put away after they are tested in humans. So you already can see that there are specific parameters and approaches which put away 99% of these, and only very, very few succeed. So that in itself should be somewhat comforting to know that we've gone through the right process to ensure that nothing damaging gets to the market, and that even though billions and billions of dollars would be spent, we still say, no, that cannot go any further, despite the economic impact that it may have on that company. The third way is the regulatory authorities. Before we move any product from one stage to the other, it has to get approval from regulatory authorities. And part of that approval is very thorough. Well, let me even start by saying the studies themselves have to be approved before we start. They have to be approved by the regulatory authorities. So not just within the company, there are controls. So the corporation itself will have controls inside to make sure that they do the right procedures, because they get audited, and if it's not done right, the penalties are severe. Sometimes, they get shut down. Smaller companies have happened. They get shut down, and that's why the larger companies have, taken that learning and make sure that they have the proper controls internally. And then there are companies like us. When it comes to us, we also have to be 100% sure that it's gone through the proper procedures and it has the proper parameters. The trials are designed such that they are not biased towards the company or towards the drug versus the comparison or the placebo. So we have to go through that as well, because that's, we have our own SOPs to follow, and we get audited as well. And then the main decider would be the regulatory authorities. So we send them the study design, the protocol, which explains very clearly about the medication, what it's used for, what it's intended, and what is the design of the study, how many subjects, how long, what are the measurements, which parameters we measure, etc. So all that has to go before we start the study. And we get approval, and then we start the study, and then we monitor the study very carefully, hourly basis. So and data comes live. We analyze the data, and if necessary, we immediately inform the regulatory authorities if there are any concerns with health and safety. So does it mean nothing ever happens? No. Things happen because we didn't know, we didn't find out, those things happen. And products even in the market occasionally, it's a rare occasion, but it happens, where even it has gone through all this and approved, but then we find something later and we pull it off the market and say it's done. That happens very rarely, but it does happen. Usually those things, when they happen, is because there are so-called drug-drug interactions. So if somebody's on polypharmacy, meaning they take many, many medications, people may not have tested all those combination of drugs together. And when you put them in the body, sometimes one drug blocks the metabolism of another drug, so it doesn't get broken up and excreted from the body. It remains in its original form, and then accumulates, and that could be dangerous. So for those reasons, sometimes it happens that we pull it from the market. But again, those are rare occasions. Again, there is every measure within the corporation that sponsors it, that owns it, with the service companies like ClinChoice, and then obviously with the regulatory authorities to make sure that there is no bias and everything is analyzed properly and accurately.
So those who organize clinical trials cannot fake the results
They will go to jail, and that has happened. Sometimes an investigator somewhere not affiliated with a company, or let's say with a service company like ClinChoice, to show that they're doing a good job, then maybe fudge the data, but it's found out because we audit and we monitor, and then it sets them apart from the other. Usually these are multi-site, so there could be 10 different investigators, sometimes in different countries, and we see one site is different than the rest. That site immediately gets audited, the data gets set aside, and people go to jail for those things.
Most drugs have large lists of side effects, and if I'm not mistaken, those are based on the information collected during the clinical trials. How do you understand that the problem that the person had was really a side effect of this drug and not something else?
Yeah, very good question again. So first of all, once a drug is ready to be put to the market, we create a label. It's called a label, where it lists what the medication is, what its ingredients are, what it is intended to be used for. And then there is a section on the side effects. And it depends on the severity of the side effects. A label could have what's called a black box warning that this drug could cause heart attack, let's say. Then under that there could be, it says, serious side effects or just general side effects. So they get listed. And usually those things are a bit lengthy. And that worries some patients who are taking the medication. The reason they are lengthy is because of exactly the question you asked. How do you know it's caused by the drug or not?
Everything they notice goes into that list?
Yes, yes, exactly. We want them to report everything they notice. And for example, they took an investigational medication and they start walking and they get dizzy. Well, we don't know if it was caused from the medication or it's because they stood up very quickly and what's called orthostatic hypotension, their blood pressure drops and they get dizzy. We don't know, but we want to find out and we want to list it, because if we see it's happening to one person, maybe maybe it was not the medication. But if it's happening to 100 people, then we say, well, most likely there. So there is one way. It's all statistical analysis to find out. That's one way. The other way is we know the mechanism of action of the drug. So it's, for example, a medication is supposed to go and target a specific receptor in the red blood cells, as an example. And we know from science and studies previously done that if you block that receptor, it could have these side effects, let's say dizziness. So that's another way to know or to make a judgment, medical judgment, that yeah, this side effect is from the medication and it's not just concurrent. It happened while you were on the medication, but we probably don't think it's, but we still list it to be on the safe side because we don't want it lost. Again, data and analysis becomes very important. So again, it's a judgment issue many times, especially early on, medical judgment, but based on very solid science. And later on, it becomes more statistical on top of the medical judgment. So that's how we figure out. And again, sometimes we never know if a certain serious side effect was caused by the medication or not. But again, I can give you an example. I used to work for the US FDA, and there was this miracle drug that was approved to be on the market for seizures. As you know, people sometimes with seizures, they don't respond to any medication, and and all their life they have seizures, even no matter how you treat them. They came up with this medication that basically was helping these what we call the refractory patients. So nothing else works, but this was treating them, and their seizures stopped. It was a miracle, and we were all so excited and happy for these patients. But I started getting reports of liver failure. Because now all of a sudden it's not 10,000 people taking it, it's 100,000 and 1 million people taking it. And liver failure is sometimes fatal, obviously, so it's a very serious thing. So the first one came, we flagged it. You say, oh, maybe you never know. The second one came, we got more worried. We got the third one, we said, stop. You have to stop the drug. And we pulled it off the market. So that can happen. But again, these are so rare. But unfortunately, it can happen.
Your company also operates in Armenia. What exactly do you do here, and what kind of trials do you organize here, if any?
So the company is a multinational, so global company. We have over 3,000 employees globally. It started in the US about 30 years ago, actually. When I took over the leadership of the international component of the company, we looked to establish a center here. We already had centers in India and the Philippines and in China. And I said, why not Armenia? So we opened the center here. We started with 2 people, and now we have over 400 employees for the past 10 years.
In Armenia?
In Armenia. Yeah, over 400. So that makes Armenia our 3rd largest site. It's larger than US, China, India, and then Armenia, and then US and Philippines, UK, Italy, we have 100 people, and so on. So it's a very critical component of this company. And in Armenia, we do the same things we do in all the other countries. However, the work or the business is not generated from Armenia. It comes from overseas. So the pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies that are our clients that give us projects, then we take those projects and put them in Armenia. And the type of work we do, clinical trials in Armenia, but those are few and far in between. It's not that many, and I can get to that as to why. But we do all the other work around the clinical trials here in Armenia, in addition to China and India, as an example. But we do the report writing, we do data analysis, we do programming. Most of our employees, vast majority, are healthcare professionals, doctors, pharmacists, nurses, most of them. But then we also have, technology people, because we do data analysis, data programming. We have statisticians, biometricians, as we call them. We have regulatory scientists and experts who know how the regulatory bodies work. And then we have medical writers. We have quite a few writers who write these reports, and they are very technical. And you need to have quite a bit of knowledge, scientific knowledge, medical knowledge, to be able to write these reports. Sometimes these reports go hundreds of pages, and they are very technical, especially for a medical device. It has engineering components in it as well. So those are the kind of works we do here in Armenia, and it's highly valued center for us, ClinChoice, but also for our clients. I have to say, and this is not because I'm Armenian and I want to brag about my homeland and about my Armenian colleagues. Once the clients, it takes time to convince them to put it in Armenia because of, they know and it's used to put it in India, let's say, or Philippines or China. But to put it in Armenia, it's a new concept for them. But once we convince them and they start, then they don't want to go anywhere else because they find this to be, the work is superb, the quality is excellent, the standards are very high. So they meet the quality standards of the other sites that we have.
And you don't perform many clinical trials here because there aren't many volunteers?
Yeah, we have very few for two reasons. One is, again, few reasons, is to convince to put it here takes effort. So that's one reason. The other reason is Armenia is not a known center for clinical trials. Third is the patient population isn't that high, so you would need, let's say, it has to be in the thousands to be able to take a few of those to the study, because not all will qualify. There are qualification parameters to say, okay, you can participate. So all that makes it smaller and smaller to be able. And I have to also be honest, culturally, Armenia, like many other countries in Asia and Middle East, they don't look at clinical trials as something they want to participate in. They view it as a testing ground, and they don't want to participate in that. But I have to bring Georgia here into this picture. They seem to have overcome that cultural barrier, and they have been doing quite a few clinical trials in Georgia. So we need to get to that level as well. So we're running a few studies now, but very soon, hopefully, we'll get more.
You mentioned you're Armenian. Were you born in Armenia?
I'm born in Western Armenia, so historic Armenia, in Dikranagert. Used to be the capital of Dikran the Great. I was born there in a village, outside, very remote village. At a very young age, we moved to Constantinople, Istanbul. I was put in the Patriarchate school there, but at age 6, I was moved to Jerusalem, to the Armenian seminary there. After 8 years, I went through a few different countries in Europe before I was sponsored and taken to the US by an American Armenian family, and they gave me the opportunity for education. I went to the most elite schools in the country. Columbia University, it's very well known, and Tufts Medical School, Tufts University School of Medicine, where I got my medical degree. So I came from nothing and reached these career heights through, misfortune at times, but also I had the good fortune of help from mostly other Armenians to be where I am. And that's one reason why we have this Armenian site here, because I want to give back to my people and my country, and also to be thankful for those who gave it to me. So that's, in a way, I hope explains why we're here.
Thank you so much.
And I have written a book about my life story. It's a very unique story, and it was translated into Armenian, published in Armenia. The translation happened by Anahit Tashtents, Hajik Tashtents's daughter. She's done a marvelous job, and I recommend everybody to read it. It's unique.